Welcome to Module 4. I'm Rana Gupta. So in the last module, we looked at the temporal and structural components of a financial plan. But if I were you, I'd be saying, all right, fine, good, got it. But how do I get this money and where do I find these needed funds that we're talking about? So in this module, we'll talk about some different forms of financing and compare and contrast them. Let me just take a minute to note something called sweat equity. Sweat equity is the time and the money and the effort that you put into this venture. But it's an underlying assumption that that's something that underlies what you do here, that you're passionate about it. And unless you're investing your own sweat equity, you really can't expect one of these other investors to invest their time and money and effort alongside with you. So, introduction, different forms of financing. Everybody knows venture capital. We all go eventually to venture capital. I'm going to do one thing here. I'm going to lump venture capital with bands of angels or angel groups because they tend to act actually like a VC firm more and more. So every time I say venture capital, I'm thinking about both venture capital funds and bands of angels. Then we have banks. Everybody knows banks, so we'll talk about those. We have grants. That's why we're here. I'm going to introduce one other category of investor, which is the single angel investor. Somebody who is writing a check from his or her personal bank account, but not with a group, just directly in your firm. And then lastly, we'll talk about customers and vendors. Have you ever thought about approaching customers and vendors for financing? And you should. I always do. It's the first place I go. We're going to compare these different types of investors along similar metrics. The first metric is consequence of failure. And we're going to put a little twist on it because I'm going to look at what's the consequence of your venture failing to that investor so that you can understand their perspective when they're looking at your deal. And that will give you some perspective on and perhaps their recalcitrance to investing in your deal unless you've got an excellent plan. Second, we'll look at the amount. What's the amount that each one of these investors is willing to invest in your company? Third, we'll look at when. When are they willing to invest? So think of it this way. The younger you are, the riskier you are. Seems reasonably obvious, but that's how we're going to consider the timing question. Now, for example, we also want to look at an SBIR grant. That's why we're here. And we want to place that in the context of these other types of investments so that you understand when are they willing to invest and under what circumstances they're willing to put money into your company. Last, we'll look at the terms of engagement, or you and I may cynically call those the strings attached. What are the strings attached to each one of these things? So that's the last one, after which actually I'll just offer some quick editorial comments, can't help myself, on each one of these forms of financing. Let's start with grants. That's why we're here. So what's a grant? First of all, you can get a grant from the government, actually, and from corporations. But a grant is a sum of money that's given to you to perform work. And it's usually there's nothing in return that you owe them except to have completed that work. What are the consequences of failure for receiving a grant? Most people think there are none. It's money that's granted to you for you to do with as you will, and you succeed or fail. In fact, that's not correct. There are consequences of failure for a grant. Let's look at them in turn. First, for these government grants, this is taxpayer money. This is your and my money. This is money we could be spending on lodging or education or food, but we're paying taxes. Second, now that the government has collected that taxpayer money, the government is obligated to spend that money as it sees fit on multiple valuable programs. So they have a choice about where they can spend the money. SBIR grants are just one of them. Third, the goal of an SBIR grant is to commercialize new technology. It's the government's way of investing in us to bring new innovations and technologies to market. If we squander that opportunity and that privilege, then one day Congress may review the SBIR program and say, you know, this isn't working so well. We're going to shrink or even eliminate the SBIR program. Amount. How much is a grant? A grant, an SBIR grant, is $1.7 million in 2 phases, meant to last over 3 years. Phase 1, $225,000. Phase 2, $1,475,000. When will the government grant SBIR money? The government considers SBIR money to be seed money, or first money in, basically, after you've got that cool innovation. The government wants you to achieve a validation milestone with the first $225,000. So let's make an assumption for a moment that that validation milestone is going to take 9 months to achieve. Okay? And then let's make an assumption that upon achieving that validation milestone, you're going to begin to write the proposal for the Phase 2 grant. And let's assume that proposal writing process, by the way, you're finishing up the Phase 1 grant, but that proposal writing process is going to take another 3 months. So now you've got 12 months into this with the $225,000. Now at this point, you've submitted the proposal, and it could take another 1 year till the government grants you the Phase 2. So let's go all the way back here and realize you may actually be investing some sweat equity in addition to the $225,000 because you've got 2 processes going on at once. Remember the processes from the last module. Process number 1, achieving the validation milestone. Process number 2 is a funding milestone to get you all the way through the 2 years to get to, in this case, we're assuming a Phase 2 grant. Let's go back a second. Where did I get that 9-month assumption to reach the validation milestone? Actually, I asked the NIH, and they said it takes about 9 months to achieve that milestone is what they've seen. So that is what we call a Tier 1 assumption. You can use that. But going back and looking at the entirety of this Phase 1 grant over 2 years, so often the CEO of a new venture receives that money and says, wow, I have $225,000. That's cool. But the fact is, that's where the hard part starts. And that's where we want to set ourselves up to succeed, to understand how do we reach the next funding, which is a Phase 2 grant. Now keep in mind, the government wants to issue these grants, but they want to see a plan from you. What does that mean? Well, it's everything we've been talking about up till now, but let's go through it very carefully. So you receive the $225,000, okay? Great. Let me ask you this. I'm going to ask the same question a couple of ways. First, what are the most elementary costs that you have to incur to achieve that validation milestone? Let me ask it a second way. What is absolutely mission critical that you have to pay for to achieve that milestone? I'm going to say it a third way, the most brutal way of all. Unless you yourself are performing the tasks in your laboratory to achieve this validation milestone, it's possible you won't see any of this money. Let's remember Module 2. Module 2 says you have to write your personal needs into your financial plan. Rule number 3 says there are no coulds. You can't say, well, I could this or I could that. We're talking about 2 years of your life during this Phase 1 grant. You have to hit a validation milestone, and you have to reach the next funding, which in this case is a Phase 2. Now going into the Phase 2, it's the same thing. They want to understand that you're going to reach your milestones and that you're going to be able now to raise external funding before the SBIR money, Phase 2 money, is exhausted. There's a figurative place that we all refer to in the world of early stage companies, especially ones that are commercializing new technologies, and it's called the Valley of Death. The Valley of Death is that time after you've got that cool innovation that we mentioned until you really have large enough funding to really get you going. SBIR grants are designed to help you get through that Valley of Death. Most startups die during the Valley of Death. That's why it has the name it has. But why do they die? They die because they run out of money. They die because they haven't built a milestone-driven plan that helps them achieve the milestone, value milestone, and then get to the next funding. So what we're doing here is setting you up to succeed by understanding that you have 2 processes and you can get through the Valley of Death, because if you do, you've increased disproportionately the probability of success thereafter. Strings and terms for government grants. So as I've indicated, this is a gated model. You get a Phase 1 grant and you get a Phase 2 grant. But let's not gloss over the fact that for each of those, there's a proposal writing time. A lot of resources go into that. So make sure you set aside the time and money you need to fill out those proposals. In fact, I recommend you attend a crash course in grant writing. Editorial comment about grants. I've indicated before that many people view this as free money. It's not free money. Please don't look at it as free money. The fact is it's very, very valuable money. We have a unique privilege and an opportunity that the government's giving us to traverse the valley of death. And what we're looking to do here in these modules is put this grant in the context of a larger financial plan. And if you do this, and if you value this grant in that larger finance context, then you'll have used it for what its intended purpose is. Okay, banks. What can a bank do for you besides give you an account into which you can put your money? Well, a bank can issue a loan. All right? So let's talk about consequences of failure. The fact is, a bank is not going to take any risk. So for them, there really is no consequence of failure. A bank is going to make sure that no matter what, they get paid back. So let's look at it this way. When we're talking about the amount of money and we're talking about when they're going to invest and we're talking about strings and terms, let me boil it down to this. Bank wants collateral. So they want something against which they can make a loan. They like to look at cash flow, but for a young venture like ours, there's really no cash flow. So they look for an asset. Well, for a young venture like ours, we really don't have valuable assets yet that we can put up as a guarantee. In which case, the bank is going to come to you and say, we want a personal guarantee from you, which could mean your home. So basically, how much they're going to invest, when they're going to invest, and what are the strings are all going to be a function of what are the assets and what are the cash flows that they can borrow against. It's as simple as that. So for them, what do they care about? A bank cares about getting paid every month. Every month they want their check. They don't care about your milestones. They don't care about your team so much. They care about the fact that you have a collateral or cash flow against which they can make a loan. Therefore, my editorial comment is this. For early stage deals that we're talking about here, a loan really isn't for us. It's inadvisable for you to take out a loan and guarantee some personal asset of yours. It's very, very risky. It could be your house, especially if you have a family. VCs. Now remember, I'm including angel groups or bands of angels along with venture capital funds or VCs. So what are they investing in? They're investing in ownership in your company. They're investing in equity. They're investing in shares. So they own a piece of your company. That's what they do. Therefore, what are the consequences of failure? Actually, the consequences of failure that if your venture fails, they lose all their money. Poof, gone, goodbye, there it goes. So they're making the ultimate risky investment in you, all or nothing. That's the nature of their investment. So if you understand that, perhaps you can understand their perspective and often their recalcitrance in making that investment because it's all at risk. The amount of money they'll invest pretty much ranges fund by fund, but to give you a couple of numbers, I'll say as low as $250,000 and as high as $20 million, just to give you some numbers to deal with. Now, when they'll invest. The when question is really like this. It's almost a question of preference, mostly risk preference, but think of it this way. Different funds, different bands of angels, like to invest in deals at different levels of maturity. Some people say, well, I like to invest early stage, straight out of the university. Another one might say, I want to invest after they have some revenue. Another may say, well, I don't want just revenue, I want 10 million in revenue. And I've just given you 3 examples, but there are many examples of where they're willing to invest in you. The onus is on you to determine that. They'll say something on their website, but you really have to dig deeper and understand that. They're certainly not going to post a video telling you all this stuff. So let's go back to this question of timing. And let's look at it first. There are some variables I want to list. Risk we've talked about. There's also the amount. And there's also how long it's going to take for their investment to mature. So we'll look at how old you are and how long it's going to take for them to cash out. That's when they can sell their shares. Now, we've talked a lot about risk already, but let me point out the reason why we're making a milestone-driven plan is to reduce risk for them. So coming back to the question of timing, what they want to be able to calculate is a very good return on investment, called an ROI, return on investment. What that means is the amount of money they're putting in, the time it's going to take until they can cash out, they have to make an adequate return. And if they can't, they're not going to make an investment in you. That's the question of when. Let me tell you a quick story about that where I made a mistake as a VC. We once made an investment in an early stage deal. It was a medical device, actually. And so we put some first money into that, and the CEO hit his milestone beautifully. Now we went to the next investors to raise the next round. And what we learned from those investors is they love the team, they love the technology, they love the product, and they love the market we were going after. But it was a problem of timing. This was so early that by the time we got through animal trials and human trials and actually launched the product, by the time they were able to cash out, it was too far away. So as much as they loved the deal, we made a mistake, and we hadn't understood the timing of when they put money in and when they'd be able to get it out, and they couldn't make their return on investment. Strings and terms for a VC investment. So first thing you have to understand is that equity investors want what's called preferred shares. Preferred shares are up here. You and I, as management in the company, we get common shares. They get preferred shares. All right, that's number one. Number two, most people like to talk about valuation first. You're going to have to negotiate a valuation with these guys, how much your company is worth, before taking their investment. Valuation is largely a function of how much they're willing to invest and how much of the company they want to own. But what I really want to draw your attention to are the other terms. There are several other terms that come with a term sheet and a contract and an investment with a venture capital firm or an angel group. So what I suggest you do is get on the web and type in venture capital investment terms. And if you do that, you'll find lots of articles and books and lots of content to read that will help you understand those additional terms. My editorial comments for venture capital investment. The first is this. I hear from so many entrepreneurs, well, I don't know about venture capital because I don't want to give up control. They're going to want control. Well, hold on a second here. Let's go back to the notion I introduced previously, which is shared objectives. The objective for a venture capital fund is to make a lot of money. That's their objective, plain and simple. If that's your objective, now you have shared objectives. So don't be afraid of the control, because the fact is you have shared objectives. They're going to take an active role in your company. They're going to be on the board of directors, and they're going to help you succeed with your objective. Second, pay attention to those other terms that I mentioned previously. There's a lot of nuance in those, and there's a lot of subtlety, and there's a lot of, I call them knobs and switches. So learn all about those terms as part of your negotiation. But boiling it all down, the essence of this equity game with a venture capital fund is this. They want you to hit your milestones, raise the value of your company, increase your stock price, raise more money, hit those milestones, and off you go. That's the nature of the game. The individual angel investor. So this is a person who's writing a check from his or her own bank account into your company. Now, it could be that you find 2 or 3 or 4 individuals, but the point is they're not banding together. Each one of them is writing a check. Could be at the same time. And once again, they're buying equity, they're buying shares in your company. Therefore, the consequences of failure, just like a VC, poof, gone, goodbye, they lose all their money. But now keep in mind, this is their personal money that's going into your venture. The amount of money that an individual angel will invest, well, it ranges, but to give you some numbers, I'll say 10,000 all the way up to a couple of million, just to give you a range. As to when they'll invest, well, that's at any time. It's once again a matter of preference. Some angels like to invest in the early stage, and some people want to see that you already have revenues, for example. So you have to look person by person, angel by angel, what's their preference. The terms and strings, just like venture capital, they're probably going to want preferred shares, but you have a little more negotiating room because you're dealing with an individual. But at this point, just assume similar terms to a venture capital fund. My editorial comment is this. Look for and consider angels that are part of your industry, and consider whether you want angels that are part of your industry or not. There are pros and cons to both. But ultimately, you're looking at the same type of equity deal. There are so many deals you can strike with customers and vendors, but let me give you a very simple one up front to help you understand one scenario. So imagine this. Imagine you say to your customer, okay, look, we're about to negotiate a contract, so what I would like is 50% of the contract value upfront. So cash payment, 50% upfront upon signing. And then you say to your vendor, for example, you know, can I delay payment for the raw materials that I just bought, let's say by 6 months? If you can negotiate that, good for you. But what you've done is you've extended your cash flow because you have cash coming in early from your customer and you've delayed payment from your vendor. This is a very simple form of customer and vendor financing, and we'll talk about more. But let me ask you, why would they do this? Well, 2 reasons. One, because they need what you have. And remember when I talked about customer discovery? And in customer discovery, you're going to identify what's the need in the marketplace, and you have to do that. Well, this is where it comes back to play. If they need what you have, they're going to have this conversation with you. The second reason is because you asked. They're not going to offer. No customer is going to say, gee, can I pay you 50% up front? And no vendor is going to say, can I delay the payment? So you're going to have to ask. I've done that. Another thing I've done in another company was I got my customers to pay for product development. And you might say, well, why'd they do that? Same 2 reasons. They needed what I had, and I asked. So there's a pattern forming here. The consequences of failure of working with large corporations, because let's face it, customers and vendors are mostly going to be large corporations, are this. It's mostly what you can negotiate. Think of it this way. If our little venture fails, it's not as if they're going to go out of business. So that's, first of all, the first thing. But really, it's a question of what you can negotiate, because that is then a function of what's the deal on the table. Are you just getting some in-kind services, or are they actually written a check into your company? But think of it this way. The consequences could be that nothing happens. You go under, and they say, okay, fine, it is what it is. But they may ask, for example, for some of your intellectual property rights. They may ask for the rights to your entire product. If they've invested a large chunk of some money, they may ask for your entire company. So that's negotiable along that spectrum of deal terms. The amount of money they'll invest. So think of it this way. If you have something they need and they see an opportunity to make a lot of money by doing business with you, well, then they're going to be interested. But think of it beyond just cash. And think of in-kind services, for example. Harken back to the phase 1 grant of $225,000, and you need to make that money last for 2 years. If you can negotiate in-kind services from a corporation, well, then you've extended your cash that allows you to hit your milestones. Now, when they're willing to invest, at that point, really it's a function of risk. Remember, there's a cliche out there, big companies like to work with big companies. Well, you and I are not running a big company, so then they're just going to look at us, and some large corporations are going to shy away from working with small ones just because of risk. And you'll have to figure that out and identify those companies that are willing to work with you. What are the strings and terms for working with large corporations? It's entirely what you negotiate. There are no set strings or terms. So what you're going to want to do is some homework. Go back to your customers, go back to your vendors that you identified in your customer discovery. But also, in the next section, we're going to talk about comparables, which is what are other companies doing that you can compare yourself to and learn. Suffice to say, at this point, go to your colleagues in your network, talk to other people who might be doing deals with customers and vendors, and learn from them. My editorial comments for working with customers and vendors. Look, it's the Wild West out there, right? There are no standards. Be creative. Think about what you need and what they can possibly offer. Go beyond cash. Think about expertise, in-kind services, manufacturing, instrumentation, marketing, distribution. These are all the various facets that could be put together in a deal. But remember this, you're going to have to ask. These guys aren't as creative as you and I are at this stage, so you're going to have to ask. And remember this also, they're risk averse. They're large corporations, so they're going to take a long time to make decisions, and you have to factor that in to your assumptions. We entrepreneurs, we are famous for asking for too little money, which is why I've suggested, I'm trying to teach you to write a milestone-driven plan, because if you write a milestone-driven plan and you implement rules 1 and rule 2, you at least have a shot at asking for enough money. But please keep in mind, we so famously don't ask for enough. My third comment is this. I'm going to tell you a little story. In my first company when I was a CEO, I was new to being a CEO, and I was running out of cash. Sure enough, I was in between milestones, or as we say here in these modules, in between gas stations. I had to go back to my lead investor and ask for some money. I knew they weren't going to be very happy with me, number one, because I was running out of cash in between milestones, but also, number two, I didn't have any other investors around the table with me to co-invest with them. So I was asking them to, as we say, go in naked. And no investor wants to go in naked. They want others with them. So I took an advisor with me to the meeting to help me out, knowing that they weren't going to be so happy with me. Sure enough, we're having the meeting. They weren't so happy with me. And just as they were about to say no, the advisor, who's a veteran in the industry, he spoke up and he said, think of it differently. If you invest this money in our company, there's this outcome, but there's also a couple of other outcomes that might be able to take place. And he helped them understand other ways they could not only get their money back, but make money. So what was once a no turned into, okay, let's think about that. So we left the meeting. I turned to the advisor, colleague, and I said, what happened there? Where did all that other stuff come from? We never talked about that when we were talking about the pitch. And he said, two things, Rana. Number one, they were about to say no, but I got them to say, by offering some other scenarios that help them understand how they can still make money in this deal, which leads me to his second point. His second point is, you're not looking at this the right way. You're looking at this as your venture. You're not looking at this as understanding that you are a steward of their money, and they need to know that your first priority is their money, because they're investing it and they want to get it back and more. That anecdote leads me to my last statement for this module, which is my favorite of all. So if I'm the investor and you're the CEO of a new venture, here's how investors actually see it. When an investor looks at you and me, they say to themselves, it's only your life. It's my money.